Welcome to the Conscious Creation Inspired Space on Twitter Spaces. Tonight we will be previewing the Human Experience podcast with podcaster extraordinaire Xavier Katana. Xavier Katana. His YouTube channel is the Human Experience, the Human Exp on YouTube. And he also has a podcast. It's pastelink.net /HXPTOP. So I'm just going to be waiting for a few more to come in. And he also has a special guest coming in this evening. It's Bernard Beitman, MD, is the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systemize the study of coincidences, a graduate of Yale Medical School. He did his psychiatric residency at Stanford University, the former chair of psychiatry of the University of Missouri Columbia Medical School for 17 years. He writes a blog for Psychology Today on coincidence and is the co-author of the award-winning book, Learning Psychotherapy, and the founder of the Coincidence Project, and he lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. We will be starting the show at 7 p.m. in a few moments. Please stand by. Welcome. Please share the room. The podcast will be starting at 7 p.m. We have a few more moments before the podcast starts. Again, Conscious Creation Inspired Spaces or Space is previewing the Human Experience podcast here with podcaster extraordinaire. I call him because I think he's awesome, Xavier Katana. And I wanted to refer to his YouTube channel also, the Human Experience, the Human Exp in YouTube. And he also has a podcast on pastelink.net, and it's HXPTOP. And again, his special guest this evening is Bernard Beitman, MD, who is the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systemize the study of coincidences, a graduate of Yale Medical School. He did his psychiatry residency at Stanford University and the former chair of psychiatry of the University of Missouri Columbia Medical School for 17 years. He writes a blog for Psychology Today on coincidence and is the co-author of the award-winning book, Learning Psychotherapy, the founder of the Coincidence Project, and he lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. This is going to be a great podcast this evening. Please share the room as we will be starting in a few moments. We're going to keep the mics off for the beginning of the podcast, and then we will be opening it up for conversation. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to be said since he's one of the first since Jung to actually take a deep dive in coincidences or synchronicities, as we've been calling them here too, as we've had spaces on that. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm very excited. So I'm going to just move forward into the podcast and get us going. Welcome, everyone. Please share the room.
Is there a way?
We will be starting shortly. Welcome all. Thank you for your patience. Please share the room. It's going to be a great podcast with Dr. Bernard Beitman, The Science of Synchronicity and Meaningful Coincidence, from the Human Experience with podcaster Xavier Katana. Welcome. Welcome all. We will be starting shortly. We're just waiting for it to start. Welcome all. Welcome to the podcast with Dr. Bernard Beitman, The Science of Synchronicity and Meaningful Coincidences with the Human Experience podcast. Welcome. We will be starting shortly. Here we go.
Have you ever had one of those moments where you just feel like there's something deeper going on? There's something else going on. When everything falls into place in this perfect sort of way. So we're just going to explore that with my guest. The human experience is giving your life a deeper sense of meaning as we welcome my guest, Dr. Bernard Beitman, onto the show. Dr. Beitman is the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systemize the study of consciousness. He's a graduate of Yale Medical School. He did his psychiatric residency at Stanford University. He is the co-author of an award-winning book, the founder of the Coincidence Project. Bernard, it's a pleasure. Welcome back. to HXP.
Great to hear your voice here, Professor X.
Yeah, I missed you, man. It's been a few years since we've talked. Why don't we just kick this off? I think most of the people that are going to be listening to this episode, they have an understanding or an idea of what synchronicity is. But as a synchronicity scientist, what do you say? What is synchronicity?
Let's talk about science and synchronicity first. Okay. I'm glad you lead with that.
Okay.
There's been lots of books written, and a lot of people talking about synchronicity, and let's add serendipity. They are both important meaningful coincidences. That's why my title of my book is Meaningful Coincidences, to include serendipity as well as synchronicity. And a couple of other things too. It's a broad term, meaningful coincidences. But what is the science of meaningful coincidences? I'm paraphrasing Thoreau, who said, "Build your castles in the air, but then ground them, bring them connected to earth." And I'm the connector between those castles in the air and earth. And that's what science attempts to do, come up with the good ideas. I mean, our audience knows that synchronicities happen. And they have all kinds of ideas about how it happens, and they hear different reasons and explanations and uses. And I've tried to bring a systematic view. And what's a systematic view? Well, a good science begins with description. And a good description usually involves categories. Mm-hmm. So I have developed in the book Meaningful Coincidences a bunch of different categories for meaningful coincidences. So that's the beginning of a science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's the first category then?
Well, the first category is meaningful coincidence, and underneath meaningful coincidences, there are four categories.
Okay.
One is synchronicity, one is serendipity, another is the lesser known seriality, and the fourth is an interesting one that happens a lot more than people recognize, that I have named simulpathity, which is the experience of the pain or distress of a loved one who is at a distance from where you are experiencing that distress. Mm. It's an important idea. That people can feel the pain of a loved one who isn't in the same room. It's more than empathy, or not the same as empathy. It's empathy at a distance, if you will. And so it's fun to try to figure out, because I'm ever curious about how that works. And maybe we'll get to my model for how simulpathity works. But that's a fourth category. The ones people are most interested in are synchronicity and serendipity. And what is synchronicity and serendipity? But let's start off with what is a coincidence. Mm-hmm. Because part of this, again, is being as clear as we can about definitions. Mm-hmm. A coincidence is the coming together of two events in a surprising and unexpected way that somehow seem to have an explanation and may somehow be meaningful to the person experiencing it. I'll say somehow and maybe, because a coincidence is still a coincidence when we don't know how to explain it. Once we know how to explain it, it's no longer a coincidence. It's mm-hmm. a connection mm-hmm. between two events, and that's just cause and effect of some kind or another. So that's a coincidence. Mm-hmm. Meaningful coincidence is one that has various emotional elements in it. A meaningful coincidence adds that the two events, it's usually two events, but it can be many events at the same time or over a period of time. The primary emotion of a meaningful coincidence is surprise. Like, what? Mm-hmm. Like, what was that? What are the odds of that is something people commonly say. Now, for those of you who experience a lot of them, you're probably no longer surprised. You kind of expect them. And that's a nice thing to be able to talk about, is that people who have meaningful coincidences as an everyday part of their life. But what I'm talking about is the beginning part of this for beginners. And for the beginning of a science is just make it simple, which is the primary response to two events coming together is surprise. And for me, one of the events that made me very surprised and very unexpected took place in San Francisco in 1972. I was 1973. It was February 26th. It was 11 p.m. on February 26, 1973. And I was standing in front of a sink in a Victorian house in the Fillmore district and choking uncontrollably. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop choking. Well, I stopped finally. That was a long time. I never choked like that before or since. So it was pretty outstanding. The next day, my brother called me and said that our father, who was in the hospital and seemed to be recovering well, our father had died, and he died by bleeding into his throat. I was experiencing something like what my father was experiencing as he lay dying. That was a surprise, because I'm a psychiatrist. I went to medical school. We weren't told about anything like this before. So I said, I gotta look into this. So that was the surprise. Amazing. What's the probability of this? A second part of meaning is that the two events have overlapping meaning. They have meaning in common. And clearly in this situation, my choking, my father's choking, were very similar. Not the same, but very similar. So the two events are analogs of each other. The similarity is variable across coincidences, and people stretch the similarity sometimes, and that's part of the fun of trying to help people figure them out. But this is pretty close, both people choking. So then comes the question, another question of meaning: what is the significance to the person experiencing the coincidence? My father, I couldn't ask, obviously, but indirectly he was talking to me. So the meaning to me was that my father died on February 27th, 1973. February 27th, which was the next day, I was February 26th in San Francisco. He was 3,000 miles away in Wilmington, Delaware. That was February 27th. That's my birthday. My father died on my birthday.
Wow.
So yeah, so I said, that's, that wow was what I did. I was like, what? So the meaning of that coincidence, coupled with the choking, was my father saying, remember Carl Beitman, remember me. By telling you and our audience this story, I am remembering him and honoring his memory. So that was the personal meaning to me. The explanation meaning was something that I pursued over the many years. The first thing I had to do was say, well, if it happened to me, did it happen to other people too? And one of the lessons of coincidence studies is if it happened to you, even however weird you think it is, it's happening to someone else. It happened to someone else. It will happen to someone else. We are all part of a great mind. I call it the psychosphere, our mental atmosphere. I'm not going out in the universe. I'm just staying with our mental atmosphere here on Earth, and we are sharing ideas with each other. So if I had this happen to me, it probably happened to other people, but I didn't know that. So I went ahead and did some research. I have created a a survey that was valid and reliable, doing all the right things to make it a reliable, valid, good survey. It's called the Weird Coincidence Survey. And if any of our audience wants to take this survey to measure their coincidence sensitivity, they can go to my website, coincider.com. And it's called Coincider, Coincider, because a coincider is someone who experiences coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to coincider.com, take the Weird Coincidence Survey. So I asked in that survey, how often do you experience the pain or distress of a loved one at a distance? And the answer was sometimes. Well, I hope it doesn't happen all the time or regularly. It happens with twins sometimes pretty regularly, but most people not that regularly. So that confirmed what I thought might be true, is that other people experience things like this choking that I experienced about my father. And more research that I found also corroborates that finding.
So Bernard, was it the context of the experience that connected it together, or was there some sort of genetic, because you are your father's child, that you would have this connection with your dad and feel what he was feeling?
Well, I glad you asked that, Xavier, because connection is the key part of this. Genes play a role in that. Research by Ian Stevenson here in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I am, showed that in his book Telepathic Impressions, that these kinds of experiences take place between people who are emotionally connected. It's often a parent and a child, but it can be people who are very good friends. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the podcaster told me a story of her own in which she got woken up in the middle of the night in great distress and found out soon after from one of her best friends that this best friend's father had been killed in a severe automobile accident. So this was the first time I've heard a kind of not feeling the pain of someone who's in a relationship to you, but someone who is in a relationship with someone who is in a relationship. And it's the same idea. She experienced the pain of her friend's loved one. She almost experienced it for her friend. And these kinds of experiences demand, I think, an explanation, and connection is a critical part of explaining.
Okay, so I mean, how do you think cause and effect relate to synchronicity?
Well, you may know that the word synchronicity was coined by Carl Jung, and
Yes.
He didn't use the term for meaningful coincidences at all. The word synchronicity for Jung meant an acausal connecting principle, meaning that he was getting kind of into quantum physics and entanglement,
Right.
and trying to say we're entangled and that's why it happened.
That's where I was going. Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's a really popular explanation these days.
Okay.
A lot of people like quantum, what I call quantum mysticism, because we don't really know how you can make an analog between small things like photons and electrons. They're doing it with bigger molecules now, showing that they can be entangled.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to make that happen, but it happens, and they can separate them far away and change a spin in one, and immediately the spin changes in the other one. And that's really a tempting metaphor for what I just described with the simulpathity experiences. However, there's a big leap between the quantum world and our Newtonian three-dimensional world, and I try to make explanations that fit our three-dimensional world, because there's a lot of stuff we don't know about what's right in front of us, what's going on around us. So I have explanations that have to do with our higher self and the psychosphere, that we communicate with people we're connected to through our higher selves, which are kind of like balloons in the psychosphere, which is our mental atmosphere, floating around above us. And because we have a good connection with somebody down here, there's a good connection between the higher selves in the psychosphere. So if something happens to one person, it goes up to the higher self, which connects the information over to the other one, and then the information goes down to the receiver. That's my simple explanation of it. There's a couple of assumptions there. Do you have a higher self? And is it located in three-dimensional space? Mm-hmm. And is there such a thing as a psychosphere? Those are the basic assumptions. If you can make those assumptions, it becomes the beginning of an explanatory model.
So what I'm gathering is you're not connected to Jung's definition. You've created your own definition for how these events occur.
Yeah, the Jung's synchronicity principle, like so many other interesting principles, including entanglement, are placeholders for further investigation. They're not really the final explanation. Jung needed another word because he knew that regular causation is not the best explanation for a lot of this stuff. There's more to it, and he was right. But whether it's his friend, the quantum physicist that helped him think about quantum mechanics, whether it's that or not, I don't think so, because I'd rather make an explanation that is more in tune with the reality that we're living here. And when I can't do that, then I'll go to something else.
I mean, there are certain moments where someone will say, "Oh, I had a synchronicity," and I'm like, "Dude, what are you talking about?" Like,
good.
It was two things that seem like they're related, but they have nothing to do with each other, and it's something that's in their own minds that they're feeling. But there are some times where it's kind of like a shock, and you're like, "Oh my God, what is going?" Like, it makes you kind of question: are we in a simulation, or what's going on here that this can happen? That because the two events, as they connect together, are so seemingly astronomically impossible that when they connect, you're in this, what you said, surprise, or for me, shock.
Well, I like to hear examples, because what you might think is very weird, chances are good I've heard that story before, because I hear a lot of stories.
Well, a really basic example would be you randomly think about a friend that you haven't talked to in a long time. Your phone rings, and it's them calling you.
That is one of the 4 most common meaningful coincidences, according to our survey. It's common. I had another person tell me about making a phone call to a chiropractor named Robin, and instead of getting the chiropractor, she got another Robin. She said, "Oh, is this Robin?" And it wasn't the chiropractor. She could tell it was her friend Robin, who was in a deep meditation and was thinking about having the person telling me the story contact her. So when you're in a deep meditation, you can send a telepathic message in the manner that I was trying to describe, this kind of rectangle thing. And because the person who made the call wanted to call a Robin, and Robin was kind of asking her to call this Robin and not the chiropractor, she unconsciously, subconsciously called the Robin who wanted to be called. And we do that. We make mistakes that really aren't mistakes.
Okay. So then, how are synchronicity and the idea of manifestation related? Like manifesting your own reality. How are those two things related?
Well, let's just go back a little bit to your saying that that you were giving an example of a very low probability coincidence.
Yeah.
And there's pretty good data from Rupert Sheldrake. Regarding telephone telepathy that suggests that it happens, especially between people who know each other well. It's a real thing. So what we're talking about is telepathy, and I'm trying to be able to give an explanation for telepathy, and that's what I just try to be able to suggest to you. So the example you gave me, you thought was a very low weird probability. It's not, Xavier. It's one of the most common coincidences that people report. What do you make out of that?
So there could be some type of morphogenic field that connects all of us together, and science just hasn't gotten up to the point of defining it just yet, and that's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, Rupert's kind of narrow in his morphogenic field definition, but it's the same general idea.
So then back to my last question, which was manifestation, because there is this idea of creating your reality by putting energy into certain thoughts. So how does that relate to synchronicity?
The simplest definition of a meaningful coincidence is an odd, surprising, hard to explain connection between a mental event and an external event, something in the environment. So if you are thinking of something like wanting it to manifest, and it happens, that's a meaningful coincidence until we find an explanation for it. So that's a basic, most common kind of coincidence, mind-environment coincidence. When you're doing it on purpose, it gets a little interesting. Because it's not just you manifesting. You have to be able to manifest something that's reasonably possible to happen. For example, if you're an Eskimo somewhere north of Fairbanks, Alaska, and it's winter, and you still happen to be living in an igloo, if it still happens out there, and you want to manifest something, you won't be able to manifest a camel with a guy riding the camel who wants to sell you some rugs. It's not going to happen.
Right.
That's too hard. So the probability of things being able to happen is a key part of manifestation. It's got to be reasonable and something that's possible in the environment that you're in. So probability plays a key role in meaningful coincidences and in manifestation as well. So if you want to manifest something, for example, a woman had a dream that her son got into Duke. She wanted her son to get into Duke. Well, that's what she wanted, and then she had a dream that he got into Duke. Did she manifest his getting into Duke? Well, he had to apply first. He had to have enough credentials to be able to be considered, all of which she knew. She thought of it as precognition, as well as manifestation. But there's also an ability of our minds to process information and estimate the probabilities of something happening. So she could also estimate the probability. And there might have been an element of just precognition in there too. So manifestation, that it was very possible, and that he was there to be able to do it, are all the variables that have to be considered in some manifestations. You've manifested things before, haven't you, Xavier?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are definitely been moments where I've felt like what I was thinking came true, and I kind of think of it as consciousness is a type of lens, right? And you can focus that lens as much as you want. The more energy that you put into that focus, the more real it can become. The more real, meaning more something that you experience through the movement of time.
The more energy you put into it, the more real it becomes.
Yeah,
I agree with that. It depends on what you're picking. Let me tell you what I don't know if I'm manifesting or I'm like discovering this. I can't tell. But this life that we're living here as three-dimensional creatures on this earth could be a lot more fun, is my opinion. I think we don't have to be so nasty to each other, and we could see Earth as a playground for us, a work playground, a place where we can do work, learn stuff, and playing while we're doing work and play. That's my thing. So I'm developing this kind of image that while you and I are talking, there's another reality that's going on in the psychosphere, I'm going to say, for lack of a better idea. And it's a movie. And the movie that I'm imagining, starting with imagine, and so important to quote Einstein here, and to quote other people and quote me too, imagination is one of the most powerful things human beings have. And what we have on this planet is a battle for people's imagination. All the stimuli coming at people is to take them away from their own potential to imagine out into buying something or being caught up in someone else's world and not being able to learn to imagine yourself. So it's something you have to practice being able to do. To learn how to imagine. Well, I practiced this for a long time without knowing that other people were doing it, and I love doing it on the athletic field. I liked imagining running the opening kickoff for a touchdown. I did that twice. I even have a film of my doing 97-yard kickoff return on my website, coincider.com, where you can see me running 97 and being very scared. All these big guys were trying to beat me up, but I managed to elude them and went 97. And it was a wonderful thing. And I'm glad I'm here to tell you that it happened. And there's the film, and my number 23 is on the back. And you could, anyway, it's enough proof that this bespectacled, I'm not having my glasses on, nerd psychiatrist.
Right.
In high school, I was like, fifth in my class and a good student. Yeah. Then I go out in the baseball and football field and do weird stuff like win the batting title in 11th grade, yeah. And make all conference to be scouted by the Oakland Raiders and football, stuff like that. So it was, I had my imagination going, because I could see other people doing it. So I thought maybe I could imagine myself also hitting the first pitch for a home run, which I did in a playoff game. And it's surprising to be able to do it. But what I learned from that is you can't be like with The Secret. You can't just lie on your bed and look at the ceiling where there's $1,000 bill and it's going to happen.
I agree. There has to be some movement, motion, effort on your part. You can't just sit around. It's not going to just appear in front of you by itself. There has to be some almost reciprocal energy that you're putting into what you want to manifest, right?
Yeah.
So then, Bernard, can synchronicity, and as it occurs, do you think we could use it as a tool to learn? I mean, a lot of the times when I have a synchronicity, I can't think of a synchronicity right now, so don't ask. But a lot of the times when it happens to me,
I'll be careful. I would ask.
I wonder if there's some deeper meaning that I'm supposed to be absorbing, or some sort of lesson I'm supposed to be learning, or maybe it's a warning. Like depending on the circumstance of the synchronicity itself.
Amen, brother. It's all those things. I give you a simple example that there are symbols running around. I like to go for walks in the woods near here. Got a couple of 3 trees that I like to communicate with. And it was getting dark, and I came back to the parking lot late. I mean, it was dusk, a little past what might be called dusk. And there was my car, and then there was a car circling my car. And I knew it was a cop trying to see what I was doing. So nothing happened. I just got in my car and got going after listening to some good music and then going. So he followed me out, and that was that. But I took that as a warning. I was late. The police were there. It was a lightweight warning, but I need to be careful about being late, about boundary crossing, about maybe night and day and dusk. It was mostly it's about boundaries and being careful is what I took away from them. So that's one. It's simple. I mean, I've been late coming out of the woods, and there's never been a cop there before. It happened then. So that's in your warning direction.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are others that I like to think that you and I have waited this long to get together again, that you are potentially helping me help you and our audience with the higher purpose of meaningful coincidences. I like to think that.
Yeah.
And the higher purpose is to help each of us find our own personal purpose in being here on Earth, and find others whose purpose overlaps with yours. I have done that in forming the Coincidence Project. We have 10 board members, including me, and each of them comes to the board with different sets of talents. Like one person is great with marketing, another person is great with storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot like one of my favorite Marvel comic book things.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not the Avengers.
Oh, okay.
I think they're boring. They're boring. Some people like the Avengers. I know. You do. You like the Avengers. But of course, Professor X, who am I talking about?
Exactly. Okay. The X-Men.
I'm talking about the X-Men, Professor X. I like the X-Men. I mean, it's a school thing. I think I like school. So they have a school for weird, smart kids. And I like smart kids. It's just like who have special talents.
So Bernard, let me get this back on track a little bit, please. So okay, so you're going to a point. You're getting to
a point.
Okay.
And I wanted to be able to tell you that this group that I'm part of are people that share a purpose with me, which is to make meaningful coincidences more out there for people to pay attention to and to tell each other coincidence stories. So I'm trying to say we got together with shared purposes with different capacities. Yeah. And the reason for that is to help other people do the same thing, find their purpose, and people who are doing something similar but have different talents. And why? And I'll end it with this. We are in a difficult circumstance here on Earth. We human beings are destroying our nest. We are committing suicide very slowly, and it's accelerating. And we need to recognize that we are each part of a collective human organism. And we need to find our personal purpose, and then find the purpose of our clan, our group, our tribe, and then have our tribe gather together with other tribes and find connections so that we can act together to stop our own suicide.
Yeah. And that's some deep stuff. And I agree. I think it's really important to have a tribe, and that is connected in whichever way you feel that benefits the earth and is doing something proactively to change their circumstance that we're in or on. Because I've had other researchers, scientists on the show, and when I asked them how much time do we have, they say, well, we had time 20 years ago. 20 years ago it was too late. So just moving on, I've got a little bit of a sort of a sideways question. Okay, I don't know.
Let me respond to what you just said very quickly, Xavier. So just a little quickly, that you talk about manifestation. I talk about manifestation. So we would have the collective human organism manifest in the ways we were just talking about, a better earth for all.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? That's why I do this show, so that people can learn about this stuff and apply it to their lives, so their lives are better and therefore, it's affecting the earth in a positive way.
Yep.
Right?
And we need to do it collectively. There's a little bit of a problem, and then I'll get off this back to your side question, but we don't get along with each other very well. We fight too much. We hate too much. We need more, people call it love, but more connections, and coincidences help us see the hidden currents that connect and unify us.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, that these types of events could be indicating or pointing or leading us to the understanding that there's more than just this physical thing, in front of us.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, my sideways question that I've been waiting to ask you this. Have you, in your research or in your science, have you recorded other cultures, other past cultures, like the Egyptians or the Vedas? Have they talked? Do they have any understanding of synchronicity? Is there anything that relates to that in those ancient cultures?
The ancient culture that is kind of still around are the Aboriginals in Australia. And if I've read about their walkabouts where they don't have much and they're walking about and they find stuff that they need, and it seems like they're thirsty and they find something under a rock where they could drink and they know it's going to happen. That's an example of expecting meaningful coincidences and being able to have them happen. Manifestation, feeling the environment. But yes, I think they're an example of what probably other cultures in the past have been able to do. I can't tell you specifically, but I'll just give you a very simple example. We haven't talked about serendipity particularly.
I was going there next. You're like a segue artist. You just do it for me.
Hey, look, Professor X, man, I'm one of your students. What am I talking about here?
I was going to get to serendipity, but go ahead and finish your point.
Well, the point is that meaningful coincidences have served as clues for how reality works for much of human history. Now, I don't have the data for that. I just have, like, let's tell a story and maybe it makes sense to you. But let's say you and I are out there hunting in some forest or jungle or something, and we would like to get a little meat for the people back at the fire at the huts and where they're just living outside someplace. At the camp. So what we're doing, and you and me are the good hunters. So we're out there and we see this mark on a tree. And it's a strange mark. And then we trot along a little further, and then we see a particular animal that maybe we've seen before but haven't really known very well. And so we begin to make a connection between the mark on the tree and the animal. And the more we go out there, the more we see there's a mark, and then nearby there's the same animal. So what seemed to be things that were not unrelated to each other, because we're human beings trying to figure out what's going on around here, we make connections. We look for patterns. We love patterns. So the tree mark and the animal became connected. So there was a causal relationship that we didn't know before between the tree mark and the animal that we found.
Right. So then that leads me to think, are synchronicities happening all the time? And are we just reaching a frequency at which we can recognize these events occurring? Could it be that?
Yeah. And by we, I think currently there are many people who never see a coincidence at all or a synchronicity. They may be happening, but they don't see them. And in order to be able to see a meaningful coincidence like serendipity as well as synchronicity, you have to be tuned into the possibility that they exist. Let's play with words. I think you like words.
I love words. All right. Words.
Let's look at the word recognition. The word recognition is recognize.
Right.
It's It's a thought, but you have to think it again. So when you recognize something, you've already seen it before, and now, like with that mark on the tree, you recognize the mark, where before you just cognized the mark. So in order to see a coincidence, you have to first have seen a coincidence, or at least heard about them, and hopefully some people who haven't paid much attention will hear our conversation and say, well, maybe I'll look around for some of those. Maybe there will be connections between my mind events and my environmental events, and maybe I'll see if some of those are happening. Like some of the fun ones for me are like coming up with a word. I forget, it happens all the time, but there's a word that I start paying attention to, and then that same word shows up in a book I'm reading, and it's a kind of weird word. Those are like our laughers. I enjoy them. They are just kind of fun, and maybe I try to think about them. But if you don't pay attention, you don't remember what you thought, and you don't notice what you thought is also what you just read, you're not going to see a coincidence.
I mean, I wonder about that. I wonder if a person that's not in tune, as you say, could correlate two events and then become someone that was in tune. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And one of the ways that happens is it gets smashed in the face with a coincidence. Something like my father and the choking is like, what? He's like, what? What was that? I mean, it was really weird for my level of understanding of such things at the time. And that made me pay yet more attention to coincidences. And that happens to people sometimes, other people, where they get, boy, that was really low probability. It could be even the telephone thing you just talked about. If it strikes the person as really weird, you might start looking for them again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there could be some sort of event that occurs, and when it does, it could spark something in you that leads you to understanding it better later. Maybe in that moment, you only understand a part of it, but then later on, as things progress, time moves, then you get it.
Absolutely. I didn't understand that choking thing for quite a long time. Yeah. You need time to absorb some of this, and it's very helpful to tell other people who are interested in coincidences your own coincidence. And so we have this thing called the Coincidence Cafe, which meets the third Saturday of every month on Zoom between 11 and 12:30, where we tell each other coincidence stories.
I love that.
And if anybody wants, good, maybe you'll join us. If anybody wants to be invited to the cafe, you can email me from my website and say I would like to be I'd like to be and get the invitation, the link to the Coincidence Cafe, and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, man, I'm down. Let's talk about coincidences. But again, I mean, look, man, like. I wonder about, I don't question if this is real or not. Like, to me, when one of these events occur, it occurs. But I sometimes think about perhaps maybe it could be a type of language. Maybe God, just for lack of a better word or another word, could God be speaking to us through synchronicities that are so tremendous that it stops everything that we're doing, and we're like, you have to think about it. You don't have a choice not to think about it.
Well, if you want to do one of those, look up in the sky, the sun and the moon. They're 93 million miles apart from where we stand. They look to be the same size. What? How did that happen? How did that happen?
I think about that all the time, actually.
Well, good. That's a wonder. And there are many wonders like that. My favorite really is chlorophyll. Without chlorophyll, we'd had no plants and we wouldn't be eating anything. And chlorophyll is far out and groovy, man. But there are all kinds of constants that without which this planet would not be habitable for human beings. A lot of people don't like to think about that, but it looks like it's a setup.
So are we in a computer simulation? And is that simulation speaking to us in some way through these synchronicities that are seemingly impossible, but then become very real?
I am most interested in what these symbols mean and finding a language or defining the language.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Thank you, Sigmund Freud. Thank you, Sigmund. You got some ashes on your cigar. You better put in the ashtray. Sometimes they are. Some coincidences are just coincidences. Absolutely. So being able to figure out which ones to pay attention to is part of the problem. I mean, you have a near-death experience and you feel at one with everything and don't worry about being dead. I mean, that's pretty far out and groovy. And that's pretty straightforward, really. Coincidences are messier. Some of them are just like elusive things that don't really mean much. They're tricky. The Joker is around running around making like I like the Roadrunner messing up Wile E. Coyote. I mean, the Roadrunner is like the coyotes usually are, trying to be like jesters and making us wonder, tricksters. And so there are some coincidences that really trick us. And there's sometimes messages in those. So it's a whole panoply of potential. But getting to what your heart is trying to speak to with your mind, Xavier, I think a subset of meaningful coincidences is a potential language, a symbolic language for us to try to decode, to see what we're being instructed about or told about or hinted about. So once we get that kind of thing going, yes, I think what we need to do is study them and figure out which ones are the ones we should pay attention to.
Do you think that there could be how can I describe it? A sort of social synchronicity where a group of people could all experience a synchronicity all at once?
Yeah.
Can you provide an example? Because synchronicities to me seem very individual. You know, it's the meaning that relates to you. It's something that you are connected to so deeply. So how could it happen on a scale that's larger than just one person?
One example is the sinking of the Titanic. There are reports of a bunch of people having premonitions of not going on the Titanic. There, a group is sharing a meaningful coincidence because Titanic went down. That's a simple example. But your question is a really good one, and I'm having to think, because I know there's a better answer than the Titanic than what you're talking about. Are we going to, like, is it a meaningful coincidence that January 6th is tomorrow and the House of Representatives is having trouble being able to find a speaker, or because some of the guys who were involved with January 6th 2 years ago are also against the speaker being elected now? Is that a coincidence that we're running through that now?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I'm talking about something more. It would have to be more ephemeral. It would have to be. I don't know. I mean, you're that.
Keep going. I want to hear your sense.
It would have to be. It would have to be something that relates to people. Perhaps they're seeing the same thing, right? They're seeing objectively. They're sharing an experience or a connection, but then it translates on an individual level.
Translate how?
It translates into their consciousness on an individual level. Like they're all together in a group, but when the synchronicity occurs, it permeates the entire group.
Maybe you can remember with me and for me, but there was I'm not going to say this very well, but several kids saw something happen on a mountain in Spain that had to do with the Virgin Mary, I think. And it was a collective experience of
That's right. Yeah.
It's a famous one. I just can't come up with it. But there was a collective experience of a strange thing. So, and there's the statues that bleed down the front of their faces that some people are able to see. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
No. I mean, it is sort of what I'm talking about. Sort of.
Keep going, because I'm very interested in this question. Because
I haven't fleshed it out enough to talk about it on a level where I think, I don't know how to describe it, but I understand the theory of it, but I don't know how to relate it to you in any other way than, there's a group of people together. They all understand that synchronicities exist, and maybe there's 5 or 6 people together. They're having coffee, and someone's on a bike, and they ride by, and as the person rides by, the synchronicity kind of permeates on an individual level, but each of them find some significant meaning in this person riding by on a bicycle, whether they own the same helmet, or they own the same bike, or whatever.
Well, I think I have something in that direction.
Okay.
My wife and 2 children, my 2 boys and I were in San Francisco at a coffee place, and my younger son was talking about a duck boat in Chicago, a boat that could go both on land and on sea, and how the person who was steering the duck boat, the captain, had made some kind of mistake, and he was laughing about that. And then, as he was telling the story, we look outside, and then a duck boat goes driving down the street, going quack, quack, quack. So as he was talking, the 3 of us got to see what he was thinking, what he was describing happened. So each of us had a different reaction to Carlin having that experience. But that's more in the direction I think you're talking about.
It's okay. I mean, we don't have to we don't have to figure out what I'm talking about in this. I think we should keep going.
I think it's a wonderful question. So yeah, I agree with you, but I think it's a wonderful question.
It's very complex, and I think the answer may be not something completely direct. But I mean, you meet with these coincidenters every week. Perhaps you could share a synchronicity together one day. I mean, do you think
they do happen? Coincidences do happen between people in our cafe, and sometimes there's a couple of them experiencing some of the same ideas. But I still think you're going further than that.
I mean, I understand that it's a type of energy, right? Like there is this sort of etheric realm, as above, so below, and the more that we can connect to it, the more that we can harness the energy of it, the more that we can be involved in the manifestation of our own lives, involved in seeing these synchronicities. I think that I think synchronicities are everywhere, and there's this neurochemical process in your brain, and when it occurs, you see that thing, and in your mind, you connect all of those dots, and you're like, oh, wow. So I think it's occurring all the time. I think we're going up into a vibratory frequency that allows us to understand the meaning of it.
Yeah, I caution a little bit of that, because I think some people are doing just what you're saying. There's a kind of spiritual elevation. People who've had the near-death experiences and lots of parapsychological experiences tend to see a lot of coincidences every day, and lots of them. And is it that they're there and nobody sees them if they're not, it's more spiritually aware, or are they having something to do with creating them, which is what I think. Their vibrational level gets to a place where they're seeing more. And some people who are very restricted and have a narrow view of themselves and what's around them don't see it. But mostly there is a subset of humanity that is seeing more and more coincidences as their energy level rises and their vibratory frequency gets higher and stronger, and that helps them see and maybe experience and create more coincidences.
So then, Bernard, how can we use these meaningful events to make our lives better?
They help us. Synchronicity helps us, that version of a meaningful coincidence, grow spiritually, interpersonally, and psychologically. And Jung was very much into all three of those things as using meaningful coincidences for that purpose. Serendipity helps with happy accidents. It helps us find things that we need without knowing how we found them, but we recognize them. They are the happy accidents that occur a lot. And if you read about Nobel Prize winners, they kind of stumble across stuff and then make up a story about systematically looking for it. So these are very helpful parts of our lives, both of them.
Yeah. Have you ever had a synchronicity change your decision-making process? Have you ever had two events coincide that affect you on a level where you've changed the direction of where you were going or in your life?
Many times.
So how can we explain that?
One of the situation which increases meaningful coincidences is when your life is getting less and less structured. When there is stress and you are in a needful environment where you're trying to look around for something that might help you with the problem you're in. But transitions of all kinds, particularly big transitions, but even smaller ones like vacations, are associated with an increase in coincidences. We're looking around for them. So that's one circumstance that tends to increase the number of coincidences people have.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I like talking about this because it seems like more and more people are talking or understanding the idea of synchronicity, and it's almost like the gateway into other higher levels of understanding and consciousness.
Xavier, you speak in my language. I call it like there's a rocket ship going up, and it's a portal. Coincidences are a portal to that rocket ship that we all can get on and have a great time, increasing our vibrational capacities. Yes.
Have you noted any historical examples of synchronicity?
Oh, yeah. The way the word coincidence, I'll use the word coincidence because that came first. I mean, Jung came up with synchronicity maybe in the 1900s, really popularized it, or tried to, with his book Synchronicity in like the mid-1950s, 1960s. Serendipity came up in the 1700s. But before serendipity, we had to get the word coincidence into our language. And the coincidence that brought coincidence into American English was the deaths of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. 50 years after they each signed the Declaration of Independence. On the July 4th, 1826, which 50 years after 1776, these two men, instrumental in what happened with the United States, died the same day. That was a big surprise to everyone. That brought the word coincidence into common use in at least America.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, it's just a silly question. Happens all the time. You can see this more and more if you just look deep enough.
Well, it's a good question, because you want to see historical records that confirm what you just said. No, it's a very important question. We want to be able to see that it's happened before, and not and point to events. There's lots of them. There are lots of them.
Dr. B, is there a way for us to increase the amount of synchronicity? Like, how can I bring myself to a point where I'm experiencing more synchronicity in my life?
First and foremost is to think they might be useful. You've got to pay attention. Whatever else I say, if you're not looking for them or open to seeing them, open's a key idea. If you're not open to seeing them, you're not going to see them. That's the way human beings are. So the way to increase them is to be open to the possibility that they might be happening to you, and then identify them. And another way to increase them is to tell people who are interested in coincidences, tell them your coincidence story, and have them tell you your coincidence story. Then you begin to form a little tribe, which a friend of mine in Boulder, Colorado has. The Coincidence Cafe is an example of that. And we're forming coincidence cafes in 3 dimensions, not just on Zoom. And you'll find people who are sharing the interest in coincidences, and that will increase your experience of coincidences. Another way to do it is read my book, Meaningful Coincidences, because for some reason or another, I'm like Tinkerbell, spreading the fairy dust of meaningful coincidence awareness to people who might be interested in it. So just having it in your mind, the idea, is another way to increase them. Other ways is to look for them more carefully during times of transition. And that includes when you need something, when you have high emotion, and when you're in a stressful circumstance. Each of those variables increase the likelihood that coincidences will happen.
It's very profound. I liked that a lot. I mean, I think, and I agree with you. I think synchronicity is kind of like the gateway drug into these higher realms of consciousness where we're experiencing more. And I wish, I wish more people were open about their experiences regarding the phenomena itself. Sometimes it's kind of just swept under the rug, or, oh, well, people are going to think I'm crazy. Why should I even talk about this?
People will think I'm crazy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what made Jung careful about bringing it to modern science. He thought they would think he was crazy. The main reason people don't talk about them is for the same reason people don't talk about dreams. They're hard to remember. Synchronicities are hard to remember unless you get slapped in the face. You got to write them down, just like dreams. And synchronicities are like dreams in the following way. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. And synchronicities are a version of the dream life of this reality that we're all running through.
Yeah.
So write them down.
Yeah. I think there's something profound about taking a thought and then putting it onto something physical, like a piece of paper.
Yep. It really changes it. I agree.
But Dr. B, something I think about a lot is the concept of like fate or destiny. So, and this might be too complex. It might be another show that we need to do this on. But if we have free will, and how does fate and destiny tie into synchronicity?
That's a wonderful question. It's a very important question, and you ask it the way a lot of people ask it, which to me is the wrong way to ask it. It's not either or. We have fate. We have free will. We have a limited amount of free will. We have some that we can use, but there are a lot of things that we're affected by that we have not much control over. And that is part of fate. But fate begins to suggest that what's happening to you is inscribed in some kind of code or book about your future. And there may be something to it, and you've been alluding to the simulation thing, and I love the simulation idea. I mean, I like the idea sometimes that the synchronicities are like glitches in the matrix, and they're hints to how the matrix is operating, which is why your question about decoding the symbols is so important, I think. But we don't know what's going on here is what I'm saying. I don't know. I'm a smart guy. I went to like Ivy League places and like blah blah blah, and I don't know what's going on here, which is why I'm into this meaningful coincidences, because they help us with clues about how reality works, and they show us how it's not just we're all connected, it shows us how we're connected. And I want to look at how we're connected. But your question about fate or simulation are very important questions, but I'm just working from the bottom up and saying, I don't know. We got some free will. Looks like some stuff seems predetermined, but there may be ways to like maybe get around some of that. But I think we got to do this together now. It's getting a little complicated.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, Dr. B, we're running out. We went overtime, actually. I was going to keep this at an hour, but let's wrap this all together for the people. How do you think we can sort of put it in a box and have people understand everything that we're talking about?
The box is the book that we could talk about. And, that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to say, I think my book can help people with this. But you want a simpler box for that. And I think what I can say to our listeners and our viewers, that meaningful coincidences are common, that weird stuff happens, and pay attention to the weird stuff, because there may be messages to you and those you love that can be helpful to you. But you have to be careful. You have to hone your intuition with your rationality to come up with which ones should you pay more attention to. But if you keep looking, if you keep observing, if you write them down, you're going to learn stuff about yourself and your environment that you don't know right now.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. B, where can people find your work? Where can they get to your website? How can people buy the book? I highly recommend the book, by the way. So it was a great read, and it's right in the vein of everything we do here at HXP. But tell us where people can go to find you.
Well, thanks, Xavier, for having me on. And there's a lot of talk about ideas of the way reality works. This is practical. This is like, I'm a doctor. I want to help people actually do something for themselves and for their planet. And they can get in touch with me at coincider.com, coincider.com, where you can join the Coincidence Project by emailing me, and I'll tell you. I'll send you the invitation. You can buy the book any place you buy books. I hope you buy them in your local bookstore, or at least order them through your local bookstore. You can join our Coincidence Cafes on Saturdays at 11 o'clock to 12:30 with that invitation. And you can get our newsletter and see what we're up to. And I have a podcast called Connecting with Coincidence, where I interviewed people about synchronicity, serendipity, and related ideas. And I have a Psychology Today blog where I get to write crazy stuff like feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. The title of that one is Knowing Someone Has Died. We have ways of doing that, and lots of others. Like one of my other favorites is interpersonal energy. That's such a great subject, interpersonal energy.
You mean like feeling someone's energy, like feeling? Yeah. It happens all the time to me.
Well, you're open and you can feel it, and playing with interpersonal energy is so important. Being aware of it and being able to love each other by being able to resonate with each other. Good relationships are good resonance with interpersonal energy.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's a great way to wrap it up, guys. It's been a really great episode. Dr. Beitman has a lot of information to share. Highly do recommend picking up a copy of Meaningful Coincidences, especially if you're interested in this subject. Well, we'll be here again next week, Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you guys then. Good night.
Hello, all. Thank you all for coming into the space today. That was a great podcast. I know some of you have come up and you had some questions or maybe wanted to discuss. Yeah. I'm still in vibe zone. Xavier really asks those deep questions. He really gets in there. I wanted just to share the post of his information because I want you guys to connect there and get his info. I'm going to repeat it again anyway, but I'm just sharing it in the nest. And you can see that information in the nest. And I'm also putting it in the message area of the room so you can get his information because it's awesome. Yeah, he wanted me to preview him on Conscious Creation Space, which I thought was awesome. And I know so many people have been inquiring about synchronicity and coincidences and how they happen to us almost every day. Xavier might be coming up and talking to us, but I know some of you had your hands up earlier on. Tamara, Tamara, did you have your hand up earlier on? I know that you did, and I think it was off the fringe. I don't know, but I'm going to keep the space open for another 5-10 minutes. If anybody wants to share anything or anything that impacted them or something new that came to them and they want to share anything from the podcast, please come up. Please come share with us. Yeah, we try to bring new speakers, new connections, just to bring our awareness closer to who we are and open up avenues of our consciousness so that we can continue to propel ourselves in, different dimensions and heighten our awareness so that we can continue moving forward in these times and making connections with others. I think that's really important. So this is why I've connected with others also to create this beautiful space and share the knowledge. Yeah. So I'm going to shut the space down. I think it's time. I have, it's already been an hour and 20 minutes that we've been on, but I really want to thank you all for coming in and sharing the space. And again, please go and connect with Xavier. So I also will be posting this on the Conscious Creation Inspired Space on YouTube, which it's at Conscious Creation Inspired Space. And the Human Experience podcast with Xavier Katana is also on YouTube at the Human Exp. You can take a look at that and register. And then he's also on pacelink.net/HXPTOP. And that's his podcast. So, oh, I have a request. Here you go. That's nice. Oh, thank you, Fireburst. Welcome. Welcome, Fireburst.
Hello, Dee. I just wanted to quickly say thank you so much for holding this space. An absolute brilliant recording. My question is, will you be able to do more based on this subject? Because it's such a inspiring subject. I believe so many synchronicities are happening within our lives on a daily basis. Will you be holding more spaces regarding this topic? And are there more recordings? That's the question. Are there more recordings to share?
It's interesting that you're asking that question, because I started the conscious creation spaces with synchronicities, and we had 1, 2, and 3, I think it was. And I think 3 was one of the people that I held. It's funny, he's here. I held 1 with 3, which was really awesome. And yeah, I think I'm going to be holding some more of them, as it's been something close to my heart too, and that I'm really interested in. So I think I would love to hold some more spaces in that respect. 3 is the podcaster that we've been talking about. I want to thank you for that great podcast. There's been 30 people here, and we've been listening. What a great interview. You're awesome. Great interview. You're the podcaster extraordinaire is what I call you now. How you doing? I can't hear you. Oops. Your mic is out. Three, is your mic not working? Savage, do you want to say something?
I'm just coming now, but what are you talking about, guys?
Okay, 3, are you okay to speak now? Yeah, I don't think 3's mic is working right now, but yeah, we're hoping to hold more of these spaces, especially on this topic on synchronicity. It's been one of my items that I love speaking about. So 3, are you open to speaking? Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Can you put, okay, good. So 3 is here. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to shut the space down now. I think we've kind of touched. Awesome. I really appreciated the podcast. Again, please go and sign up for Xavier Katana's Human Experience YouTube channel and the Pacelink podcast channel. I've attached both in the nest and in the bubble down below, so you can go ahead and click in the links. And also there's the At Conscious Creation Inspired Space by myself. And yeah, please stay connected, as we will be holding more spaces. Thank you all. Have a great evening.